We've now reached the part of Assassin's Creed Shadows controversy where the journalists are having praised the game and claiming it's some return to form for Assassin's Creed as a franchise, are now beginning to turn on the very things that they were white knighting. Let's start with this from the gamer. There is no good reason to play as Yasuke in Assassin's Creed Shadows. Yeah, you heard that right. The gamer of all people is already turning on Yasuke, and I have to agree with them here after my about 20 to maybe 25 hours of playtime that I've sunk into this game so far. Early on in this article, the writer, Jade King, says this: "Even if you have all the power in the world, it's difficult to care about characters or what they are going through if there isn't a struggle for the player to empathize with both narratively and mechanically. You can put me on a battlefield with the coolest weapons and abilities ever, but if this means I can mow down enemies without breaking a sweat, why should I care?" That's a defining problem with Yasuke in Assassin's Creed Shadows. But it's here with this paragraph that praises Naoe as a playable character, saying how you have to think about what you're actually doing when you play as her, how you can stealth around, who you should kill first, and so on, that makes her gameplay at the very least feel like an Assassin's Creed game. But it's then at the end of this paragraph where the gamer sinks the knife and admits that once Yasuke becomes fully playable, he ruins the game. And I agree. You see, until you unlock Yasuke, Shadows just kinda plays like a bog standard Assassin's Creed game. Nothing really sticks out. The combat with Naoe, especially early on, is just frustratingly bare bones, because you don't have enough points to really unlock more interesting moves. Her entire style is of course stealth, and I will admit, as you progress her assassin tree, yeah, you can eventually make her hidden blade actually finally feel like how it's supposed to be like in previous games. You're going to routinely not be able to kill harder targets with an assassination, but once you upgrade it enough, you can then start actually killing even the harder enemies. Well, mostly. Even then, some still don't die instantly, which is, yes, very annoying. I played Naoe for the first 10 or so hours of the game, and while nothing was revolutionary about it, at the very least I was an assassin doing assassiny things in my Ass Creed game. Then came Yasuke, where, oh god, I just gotta explain this to you guys. So, the entire way that Yasuke and Naoe team up and everything is a perfect example of how poor the writing is in this game, and I need to explain it to you with how it actually plays out in game. So, Naoe gets a message to meet Akechi Mitsuhide. He's the general of Oda Nobunaga. That's the guy who bought Yasuke in the beginning of the game. So in real life, and this isn't a spoiler or anything, this actually happened, Akechi Mitsuhide betrays Oda Nobunaga and turns his own forces against him. So this all really happened, and then it led to the fall of Oda and his empire, and if history is to be believed, once Akechi did this, he took Yasuke, who briefly knew Oda at this point, and gave him back to the Jesuits, and Yasuke was never heard from again in history. Of course, instead here, Yasuke is the legendary Black Samurai. Please clap for him, which let me explain that to you now. So, when the game opens, Yasuke gets bought by Oda Nobunaga from the Portuguese. What's wild, however, is that the game then fast forwards to its first combat mission as Yasuke decked out in his full gear and weapons, and I'm not kidding you, a mere 6 months after meeting Oda Nobunaga and reaching Japan. So the Yasuke that you play in this game with his ability to overcome his enemies, kill any other samurai or ninja and whatnot, he has only been training with the katana and naginata and so on for half a year at this point. Yeah, I know, it's as ridiculous as it sounds, but fast forwarding to Akechi Mitsuhide betraying Oda Nobunaga, Naoe ends up meeting with Akechi, and he lies to her by saying that Oda Nobunaga was the head of those evil shinobi that killed her dad in the opening of the game. He even then shows her the mask to prove it. And it's so obvious that this mask doesn't belong to Oda, but likely to Akechi, or someone that he knows that he's working with instead. But since the writers thinks we're all idiots, and the betrayal here is so painfully obvious to the player that the fact that Naoe, a shinobi, who has been trained from birth to assassinate her targets and find information on people, like that's all she knows. She just ends up accepting Akechi's claims as truth. This level of piss poor writing, it's all over Shadows, and honestly, it's one of the game's biggest problems for me the more I play it, which is that the writers of Shadows are actually god-awful at their jobs when comparing the level of writing here if you compare it to, say, Black Flag. Assassin's Creed 2, or hell, if you want to be more current and fair I guess, even Valhalla somehow has better writing if you can believe it. Everyone in this game just kind of comes off as dumbasses, really, and they oftentimes don't sound like they exist in the time period that they're living in. Anyways, Naoe agrees to assassinate Oda Nobunaga, believing that he was responsible for killing her dad. So you stealth into the castle, taking people out and whatnot, and eventually you arrive at Oda Nobunaga's chambers. Naoe then plays the ocarina instrument thing that her dad played to tell Oda that she's in the room with him, which is stupid, because first, you're an assassin. Why are you giving your position away? And secondly, Oda is an accomplished swordsman. This is just putting yourself in needless danger. Again, like I said, piss poor writing. Anyway, you fight Oda Nobunaga, you win because girl power, and Naoe then accuses Oda of killing her dad and destroying her clan. Oda tells her he knows nothing about this shadowy ninja group she speaks of and realizes in that moment that Akechi Mitsuhide has double-crossed them both in order to overtake his empire. Wow, who could have saw that coming? Yasuke then arrives out of nowhere, nobody can hear him even though he's like 6'7" or whatever, but anyway, he fights Naoe and realizes that she has a hidden blade on her arm. How does he know what a hidden blade is? I'll get to that in a second because that's another really stupid moment, but anyway, firstly, how history then, proceeds how it does in real life. Oda pulls out his knife, commits seppuku to retain his honor, and then Yasuke is chosen to be his second and cuts him down. Which is ridiculous because usually whoever cuts you down during this ritual is your most trusted ally. Again, Oda has only known Yasuke for 6 months at this point. But what can you do? Bad writing, Oda dies, Yasuke and Naoe escape, and Akechi Mitsuhide takes over his empire. Dun 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 dun, let's keep going. Naoe is all sad saying, how could she be bamboozled by this guy who was so obviously using her? But I guess the plot needed to happen. We then get to play as Yasuke finally, since the beginning of the game, where he then cuts down multiple samurai and other soldiers to make his way to Naoe. How does he know exactly where Naoe is? Because the plot needs to happen. So this guy, who's been using a katana for less time than it takes someone to become a plumber in real life, just mercilessly cuts down everyone, as if he's just been handling a katana for years at this point. They all die, and like thegamer.com says, Yasuke ruins the game, and I agree. Because while you play as Yasuke, you're suddenly no longer in an Assassin's Creed game. You feel like you're playing some kind of bog standard action game at the best of times. Gone are the hidden blades, the stealth, all the things that the franchise is known for. I mean, for God's sakes, you can't even climb trees in this game like you could in previous games. Here's a clip from Nick Tech showing just that. Anyway, Yasuke reaches Naoe and Naoe confronts him and says she should kill him because he burnt down her clan's home in the beginning, which I mean, yeah, he did, so it's justified. Then we find out why Yasuke didn't kill her and we flash back to the beginning of the game. Oh boy, here we go. During the siege of the Iga clan, Oda and Yasuke come upon Momochi Sandayu. This guy that you're seeing on screen here was the real-life leader of the legendary Iga Shinobi, a real-life group of assassins that worked in the shadows during this time period. These people were legendary, dude. So this is a man that is trained as an assassin in all the ways that you could think of on how to kill a man since he was like a child. And as you can see, he is an old man now, so this guy's knowledge of killing people is about as common to him as breathing at this point. So Oda leaves Yasuke to fight Momochi Sandayu, and they fight. And in one of the most hilarious moments yet, Yasuke actually defeats Momochi Sandayu in combat and ends his life. Yeah, you heard that right. The so-called legendary black samurai who didn't even know Japan existed 6 months ago just beat the leader of the legendary shinobi in combat. This would be like someone coming to Italy who's been there for 6 months and you give him a sword. And then he takes on Ezio Auditore and he kills him in Mortal Kombat. Like, you gotta be kidding me, dude. Sure, you could say, oh, he's older, so Yasuke had the edge, but this guy is the Iga leader. He's an assassin, dude. Firstly, he would never face you in open combat like this, and even if he did, he would use stuff like poison and smoke and more to turn the edge to him because, I don't know, he's an assassin for God's sakes. But again, the plot needs to happen. So Momochi Sandayu dies at the hands of Yasuke. This guy is pretty much Naoe's grandfather, for all intents and purposes pretty much, and Yasuke then sees his hidden blade and Sandayu tells Yasuke to protect the girl who has the hidden blade. So this is why Yasuke didn't kill Naoe in Oda's chambers, and he admits to Naoe that, hey, I killed your grandfather you knew your entire life. And Naoe is obviously very pissed, so here sits the Black Terminator who burned her home down, killed her grandfather pretty much, as well as all of her friends and other family that we don't see, and directly led to her father dying pretty much. Like, what are we doing? And then the chubby Japanese boy that you save who lives with that weird monk guy comes in and tells Naoe that she should forgive him. And then Junjiro here admits that Naoe killed his father, who was a random soldier, at some point too. But he was able to forgive her for killing his dad because of the old monk he lives with telling him that forgiveness is the way to go in life and not revenge. So yeah, you can see the whole Last of Us Part 2 parallels here on full display, and no, I don't agree with any of it. So just like that, Naoe accepts Yasuke's help to defeat Akechi because she realizes she's no better than him, I guess. It's probably one of the only moments in the game where the writing is decent, but it's still pretty stupid. Although, if we're being honest, if the guy who killed my family and burned my home down asked for forgiveness, yeah, sorry dude, I'd still cut you down. Like, sorry for killing your family, burning everything you know and whatnot, my bad, yeah, whatever man, time to go sleep forever, I guess. Immediately following this, Yasuke and Naoe, everything's just brushed aside. All the history, gone. They're just best buds now. It's actually surreal how fast it turns. It's like if Ellie and Abby from Last of Us 2 just, I don't know, went on a trip together and were like giggling and tickling each other the entire time. That's what it feels like, dude. There's even a scene where they drink together and they get drunk and then they pass out until the following morning. These people went from mortal enemies to drinking buddies in record time. It doesn't feel natural at all, but again, the writing in this game is just not good at all, and the plot needs to happen. So circling back to the Gamer's article, they're right that Yasuke doesn't fit in this game at all. Once you actually unlock him and get to play as him, it's very clear that Ubisoft didn't have a good idea in their heads with how to implement or justify Yasuke existing here. Like, it would take me 20 to maybe 30 minutes to clear most castles as Naoe, because, you know, I have to read enemy movement, stealth around, don't get caught, and kill people from the shadows and whatnot. But as Yasuke, oh boy, I decided to immediately just go find a castle as soon as I unlocked him, and I just wanted to see, how fast could I do it as him with his base kit and armor that he starts the game with? I kid you not, I was able to clear a castle as Yasuke in 5 minutes or less flat, as you can see here on screen. You're seeing me playing as Yasuke, just obliterating waves of random Japanese men as if they're like children that are fighting an adult. Yasuke is so unbelievably overpowered that the only times he feels like he's in danger is when he gets swarmed by maybe 10 guys at once. But if it's even just like a few dudes, maybe even like 5 dudes, that's still a lot of dudes, but you're going to just mow them down anyways. And you're probably looking at this gameplay and thinking, how is this supposed to be Assassin's Creed? And you're right, it feels nothing like the series at all. There's nothing tactical going on here, no stealth, no hidden blade, nothing that the series is really known for. You literally just run around like a grown man in a McDonald's jungle gym, and then just start killing people with no remorse until eventually you get the same rewards that you would as Naoe, and then this then brings up another big problem that the gamer brings up as well. Which is that once you unlock Yasuke, it becomes honestly pointless to keep playing as Naoe for most of the missions or base clearing, unless you just, frankly, want more challenge, I guess, and want to take far longer to complete something that you can mindlessly do in like 5 minutes flat as Yasuke instead. It feels as though Ubisoft added Yasuke so that non-Assassin's Creed players who've never played this series before could just pick him, I guess, and essentially just beat the whole game without having to use their brains even once, because nothing about Yasuke feels like Assassin's Creed. And there's this also like gross feeling as I play as him, knowing that I'm just some foreigner who's cutting down native Japanese people that are honestly just minding their own business like 80% of the time as him. He leaves everywhere he goes looking like a mess. Furniture gets destroyed, doors get cut in half, blood everywhere. He can somehow run through solid like wooden doors that are like over a meter thick somehow. And also, if you turn on the blood effects, you can then see just how much of a massacre Yasuke leaves behind, but I can't show you that because if I show all the blood, it's, going to get me age restricted, which is stupid, but it is what it is. But I did turn it on for a little bit when I wasn't recording just to see what it looks like, and honestly, it's ridiculous. If you do play this game with dismemberment and blood effects on, Yasuke pretty much just leaves every encounter as if a movie monster just found a group of defenseless teens in like their room or something. It's just absolute carnage when you play as Yasuke. It doesn't feel like Assassin's Creed at all. You're like cutting people's heads off, their limbs, everything, dude. It's ridiculous. And the more that I learn about Yasuke, the more he just feels completely unjustified to be here. But the fact that the 6-month samurai was able to kill the leader of the Iga Shinobi is genuinely, that's one of the most baffling moments in this game so far. I think the gamer puts it well here as to how Yasuke just doesn't make any sense at all being in this game. He ruined Naoe's life by enabling the death of her father at the start of the narrative, but this is brushed over immediately and the two are then drinking together like the best pals. Assassin's Creed settles into its usual cadence of micro-stories that follow specific targets instead of the better option of telling a cohesive story, made up of worthwhile character arcs, meaning there isn't a good enough reason to care about Yasuke's plight before it's too late. Sticking with just one character and pouring everything into their perspective would have worked best, even if I can understand what Ubisoft was going for with this dual approach. But even then, it fails to stick the landing. I agree, because once you do the main mission where Yasuke and Naoe finally come together, the majority of this game's story, and I put that in quotations because it's barely even a story really, it's just you searching for clues as to where this person on your board is so that you can kill them. There isn't an actual story that really matters until I guess you get to the head honcho of each subgroup of villains that you're killing. But even then, you don't really care about who these people are or what they're even doing because they all blend into one another. And it all just ends up feeling like the typical busy work this series has been known for since the RPG era of these games. The gamer continues, like I mentioned, Yasuke is powerful. It's like throwing a Terminator into Animal Crossing as it tears your entire island populace to shreds. All the nuances I mentioned earlier about the importance of dodging, parrying, and being careful about the encounters you take on doesn't matter anymore, because Yasuke is powerful enough to tank the majority of offense thrown to him. Yes, not pressing a single button or being overwhelmed by dozens of bad guys at once is going to offer up some resistance. But the fact I have to make this clear isn't good, and I agree again. Yasuke frankly just diminishes the entire player experience here. Not to mention the guy just can't climb the big towers because he has no grapple hook either. Thankfully, yes, you can switch between Naoe or Yasuke by holding square and then they just immediately switch spots after a brief loading screen. This also seems weird because it insinuates that Naoe and Yasuke are traveling together everywhere they go as they show up in cutscenes together no matter who you're playing at the time. Like here, I'm looking for someone at a sumo match and they're both present. But to be honest with you, the better approach here to at least justify the dual protagonist shtick would have been to have had both characters on screen fighting together at the same time. And then you could click a button, sort of like in the Batman Arkham games, where you could switch between Batman and Nightwing during those fight sequences using certain moves, or just pressing a button. At least then, you could on the fly become either character at will and would not only feel more fluid, but it would also make it seem like these two are truly teaming up to face the threats in front of them that they can't face alone. It would also be a very good idea because then it would allow the devs and writers to have Dragon Age or Mass Effect-like squad member dialogue between them too, where you could be riding your horse from point A to point B as Naoe, okay? And then Yasuke's behind you and he could just ask Naoe a question as they ride. Or they could have a whole conversation on the way about things in the world. This could have been used to flesh out these characters a lot more, and how their companionship evolves, and how their different upbringings and views could be challenged against one another between all the fighting and missions. Instead, you ride in silence, nobody speaks, and you play whoever you pick, and then the other just kind of emerges out of the ether like a ghost if you choose to play as them instead. It just feels weird, awkward, and downright dumb at times. Maybe Ubisoft didn't want both heroes present because it would be too challenging to make the AI work or something. But I mean, if games like The Last of Us had Ellie following Joel around and stealthing right past dudes where they would be able to see her, and the game would just, keep going and not acknowledge it, it is dumb, but hey, at the least she was there when the crap would hit the fan when you played that game. Here, it just feels like this weirdly lonely journey of disconnected smaller stories across a map that routinely keeps you on roads, because the game is just built in a way that I can only call a bowl-like environment. And what I mean by this is if you try to climb out of the bowl and get out, the edges are too steep. And then you kind of just fall back into the broth of the meal if that makes sense of the bowl. Which means oftentimes if you want to get somewhere, it's almost pointless to try to get there on your own free will or choice. Because of all the trees and how the game is designed, most of the time you will just run into a bunch of trees if you try to, go your own way, and then you can't go that way because you just fall back down. And it's honestly just far more convenient to just turn the Pathfinder feature on and then just follow the line that's on the ground, and then it'll just take you exactly where you need to go. Honestly, the entire time that I played Shadows as either Naoe or Yasuke, it kinda just made me yearn for Valhalla again. Sure, Valhalla was kinda mindless too, but at the very least, Eivor was an interesting character. The combat was visceral, and I could switch on the fly when I wanted to. I had raids that I could do. I had the boat stuff that I could helm and, ride around on that, and there were even these sagas that you could complete in-game that told overarching stories per the area that you were in. In Shadow's case, none of these things are present, really. You don't have a boat that you can call on command. You can't go on raids. The RPG mechanics are just surface level at best. The skill tree is far smaller and straightforward compared to Valhalla's. There's less weapon choice, and you can't combine weapons like you could in Valhalla either. In Valhalla, you can fight with 2 greatswords, a sword and an axe, or hell, you can even use 2 shields if you want. Or a shield and a spear, or 2 spears, or a spear and a big axe, or a small axe, and so on and so on. There was a lot of flexibility there. It allowed you to pretty much play the combat how you wanted to. It wasn't perfect, but at least it had player choice. But in Shadow's case, Naoe has the katana, the kasurigama, and the tanto knife. That's literally all she has for melee weapons. And for Yasuke, he has the katana, the naginata, that's the long spear with the giant blade on the end, the big club, I can't remember, is it called tambo, doesn't matter, whatever. And then you have a gun and a bow. But would you like to dual wield, I don't know, katanas, or maybe do a build where Yasuke uses 2 giant naginatas, and maybe you can specialize in that? Maybe you want to use a katana with the big club and be this gigantic bruiser build, and you could spec him that wise. But no, you can't do any of that. It's just limited. There's less attack options, there's less weapon abilities, all of it just feels frustratingly far more limited. When you compare it to Valhalla, the previous RPG game in this series, hell, even Odyssey. And while sure, Valhalla had its problems from, its own bloat and bad writing at times too, at least that game's story felt more important and it was always in its forefront. But then again, if I remember correctly, the guy who wrote Valhalla, he also wrote Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. And it's very obvious that the people here who wrote Shadows have either lost the ability to tell a compelling story, or they're just newcomers to the franchise because everything feels wooden at the best of times. Look, the point here is that while some critics are disavowing Yasuke being a part of Assassin's Creed for credible reasons, I mean IGN did that too, but this video is way too long already, but they did talk about that as well. The majority of gaming news outlets will ignore any criticism or legit complaints because they want to ensure that they keep good relations with these companies. I already know that Ubisoft wants me dead as hell, so it doesn't matter to me, which is why I tell you these things and then bring you proof to support it by me playing it. That way, they can't mask my opinion or what I think, and if this game was doing well, it would be saving Ubisoft right now. Look, I'll keep trudging through Shadows, but the reality is that I personally believe that this is the worst of the AC RPG era of games. That includes Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla, and now Shadows. Funnily enough, I think the order these games were released in are also their best to worst quality too. Yasuke simply doesn't justify himself being here, he feels completely out of place, and the fact they did nothing interesting with his gameplay mechanics, beyond let's just make him a tank that kills things, is actually kinda pathetic to see. I wish I was lying, but Assassin's Creed Shadows is truly one of the more disappointing games that I've played this year. But for now, this is enough. I'm tired of talking, you're probably tired of me speaking. Let's stop for now, I'll be back with more. Thank you for watching, subscribe, and I'll see you again.